Eagles fly. That's right. We back, mic'd up team recap. We talking about the Philadelphia Eagles today with my boy Mike Previll. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I didn't realize I was doing these team recaps of EDP or some Eagles super fan here, but I guess I got to work with what I got. So
It happens, you know. We just gonna fly right through this. Let's keep it going. Right into the draft class. I like it. So, obviously, looking at this draft class, Mike, what are your thoughts?
I think that it's an interesting class because everybody looks at the Eagles and I feel like they kind of see the product that they put on the field last year, and they think, okay, the number one wide receiver is Greg Ward, or they have no cornerbacks, and Carson Wentz gets hurt all the time, so we need to replace him. And I don't, maybe not replace him, but we'll get to that. I don't really think that that's necessarily realistic. I think that if this team's fully healthy, sure, you might have needed a receiver, but maybe you didn't need a receiver like Jalen Rieger at 21, who does, at least to me, he does a lot of the same stuff as Deshaun Jackson, you know. And maybe you didn't need a quarterback in the second round. Maybe you could have went linebacker or somewhere else there, and especially a quarterback that to me you really overdrafted. I know we kind of touched on it in a previous video, but teams are really kind of getting infatuated with guys and their speed. And Jalen Hurts, to me, I hate to say it, but he's not a good quarterback in terms of just throwing the ball. He's a super dynamic athlete, and what he can do on the ground is special. But I really do think that you overdrafted a guy who really can't throw the ball in the second round. To me, if you want to take a guy like that, it should be in the third, fourth, maybe even fifth round, to be honest. And you already have Carson Wentz. So everybody says like, oh, he could be their Taysom Hill. I don't I don't really think that Taysom Hill is what makes the Saints win. I think it's the fact that they barely have any holes everywhere else. So what were your thoughts on the class?
Yeah, so I'm going to coin a new term here. I'm going to call it the Sonic syndrome. I think you see it a lot, actually, after the combine. You see these athletes with the high 4.2, low 4.3 speed run up draft boards. And if you put on tape, you don't see why they're running up draft boards. And that's Jalen Rieger. He had that video come out. I think it was a 4.29 in his pro day video. Um, and I think that's where the Eagles started getting interest. And they're like, wow, this speed, being able to take that top off. When I don't think the film shows 4.29 speed. And I don't think his talent does either. It doesn't. There was better players on the board here for this pick. Justin Jefferson, and even the ones that went early in the second round with Pittman and help me out here.
Uh, like Chase Claypool would have been a really interesting guy.
Yeah.
For instance, I mean, you look at we talk about Rieger doing a lot of what Deshaun does. Chase Claypool is a guy who does a lot of what Alshon does, and to me, that's almost more important to a team. A guy who can, because Jalen Rieger is not a volume receiver. He might have been at TCU because he was the best player on their team, but in the NFL, really nobody of his kind of size and of kind of his prototype have been volume guys. When I think of Jalen Rieger, I think of almost like a Curtis Samuel type guy, someone that is you're going to use as a Swiss Army knife, who might be, or an Anthony Miller type guy would actually be a really good example, because the Bears are always sending him on end arounds and just fake motioning him and trying to send him deep, even though he really can't get that much separation. I do think Rieger will get a lot more separation, obviously, but I do think there were definitely other options there in the second round, especially, and even into the third and fourth. I feel like we've talked about him a bunch now, but like Antonio Gandy Golden was on a lot of people's boards a second, third round pick, and he ends up going in the mid fourth to the Redskins. I think that a guy like that would have almost been better than a Jack Driscoll, for example. You could have traded up and got him in the fourth. You could have got him in the third even, and I think that would have been better value, because I don't know if Rieger's good value. I think he will help the team for sure, but I don't know if that's the best value at 21.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the guy I couldn't think of was T. Higgins. I think it would have been an interesting pick. They might have had to trade back a little bit, add some capital, but I don't think Rieger was the right pick. But I will say one thing in this draft class, a name that doesn't show up, which I think shouldn't be necessarily included in the draft class, but with the capital they had was Darius Slay. I think being able to pick him up with a third-round pick, we've seen for a while corner depth for them, or just having starters in general has been rough for them. So I think adding a player, obviously we're Lions fans, so a little biased, but to add a top 5 to top 10 talented cornerback, still in his 20s, late 20s, 29, but you still have a couple good years, and to be able to get that with a third-round pick, I think kind of helps me really hone in this draft class, and I can understand maybe reaching on a couple other picks.
No, I completely agree. I think that if you look at this draft class as just the draft class, I think it leaves a lot to be desired. I really think after Rieger, you have just a lot of developmental pieces from Hurts down. Honestly, I think if you look at it as we got Darius Slay, and then Jalen Rieger, like then it's like okay, I can kind of see it because like you said, Darius Slay, he is easily a top 5 to 10 cornerback. I know PFF didn't have him graded very highly last year. Well, we watch every game, both of us separately, and I think we both individually have come to the conclusion that Darius Slay is still an elite cornerback. And to get him for what was it, a third and a fifth, that's astronomical value. So anywhere that I'm kind of dinging them for value on the actual draft class, they're kind of making it back with Darius Slay, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's right where I'm at. And I guess from that, do you want to start getting into the roster, the depth chart?
Absolutely. So first things first, this doesn't even look like the Philadelphia Eagles, Mike. I didn't see any of these guys on the field last year. At least that's what
No,
it
this is
feels
their
like.
IR right here.
I know it actually is, but in all seriousness, what holes does this team even have? Because we saw towards the end of last year, this team looked like it was only holes, but their actual roster, there's really not that many.
No, I don't think there is. I think with this offense, you do need depth, and I think they've addressed that a little bit this year. But I think the one I wouldn't say it's a whole. I think they could use improvement is the running back position. I think Miles Sanders is a nice piece. He'd be a nice part in a rotation of running backs, but he is not your bell cow running back. He's not the guy you want to have 20 carries a game. I think they needed something to replace Jordan Howard to give that duo. I think in the second round, I think there was a player he might went a little bit before. No, I think he went after. J.K. Dobbins would have been a very good pick
Yep.
in that second round to give him that extra dynamic, especially with Miles Sanders. So I think that's where they could still use improvement. There's obviously some running backs still available. I think there's going to be some after the cuts as the NFL has started to underutilize and undervalue running back. So I think there's still opportunity to fill that. But right now, I think the running back position could still use some help.
No, I completely agree. I think where I want Miles Sanders being used, if I'm a coach or if I'm a GM, is I want him to be used like almost an Austin Eckler in LA last season with Melvin Gordon because he is a two-dimensional player for sure, but his strength is not pounding the ball up the middle and really punishing the defense and setting the tone. I think Miles is best utilized in small doses, and then that's where you'll see like, oh, the home run hitter kind of come out of him. I think if you're giving him 20 touches a game and almost acting as if he's a Saquon Barkley type, I think that's really naive. Whereas I think you could potentially swing for maybe one of those free agents, like you said, or maybe even a trade. I know a lot of people have been talking about the Jaguars getting rid of Leonard Fournette. I think if you can swing a good deal, and Howie Roseman, he seems like he's the master of getting good veterans in really kind of steals during trade talks. I think that Leonard Fournette would be a great piece to kind of put here to really force the defense to have 7, 8 guys in the box, and then you get to see Carson Wentz, who has one of the strongest arms in the league, and then you get to see these two receivers, these 4-3, 4-2 receivers taking the top off the defense. But I think as is with Miles Sanders, I think you're just going to have a lot of teams sitting back, playing this comfortable zone, don't get beat over the top, and then we're going to let our front seven kind of make plays in the box because we're not really worried about having to make plays in the box. So, and then another position that I'm really interested in, obviously, is left tackle. I mean, we've had Jason Peters here in Philly for it feels like my entire life, and now that he's 38 years old, he's a free agent. They're not bringing him back. I think they're kind of handing the reins to Andre Dillard, and I think that's going to be a really interesting situation because he is protecting Carson Wentz's blind side. Everybody looks at Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks, and Jason Kelsey as being all these Pro Bowl caliber type guys, but really it's going to come down to Andre Dillard to protect Carson Wentz for the most part because going against those left defensive ends, that's where that's where the money is made. So I think that's going to be super interesting as well. But do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think the only thing to add on that is 2 times a year each, he's going to have to see DeMarcus Lawrence and Chase Young. So he's going to get his handful, and he's going to get it early. So I think obviously that left tackle is going to be huge. And with Carson Wentz's injury concerns, he got to stack up. So I guess from there, let's get on the more exciting side of the ball. Me and you are both defensive fans. Let's get into defensive depth chart. So, initial look at this. I know you usually say me, so I'm going to switch it up on you. What's your thought on that front four?
Oh man, that front four. It feels like every team we're looking at has really good front fours at this point, and maybe we need to change the standard for what a good front four is. Because if everybody has a good front four, then really who has a good front four? But the Eagles do have really great front four. Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox. They're getting older, sure, but they still have it. Javon Hargrave. They might have. A lot of people think they might have overpaid for him, but there's so much value in getting a dynamic one tech who can eat up double teams and still be a little bit dynamic when it comes to rushing the passer. And then Derek Barnett. I'm a huge Derek Barnett fan. I was gonna talk about him a little bit later on, but we can get to him right now. I mean, a lot of what we saw him do in college, just in terms of his ability to bend the edge and sink his hips and explode towards opposing quarterbacks, like it was really special. I think I've really kind of seriously been scouting for 5 years now, and I don't know if I've seen somebody with just better straight bend around the edge than Derek Barnett. Obviously, he's not the most explosive athlete, but I think that's a guy who's kind of primed and ready to go and take on a bigger role in this defense going forward. So I'm going to flip that back on you. Who do you think could be a breakout candidate on the defense this upcoming year?
Yeah, for me, the guy I kind of have my eye on is Sidney Jones. I think obviously he had the injury in college that kind of followed him into the NFL. His rookie season was kind of lost in that. So his sophomore season was more of his rookie season. And with corners, especially, you don't see them really producing year one. And I think that's what happened with Sidney Jones. So I think being able to get Darius Slay in there, move him really over to corner two, being able to learn from a veteran like Darius Slay, I think that could do wonders for him. And as long as that front seven can stay healthy, they're going to get pressure. They're going to make quarterbacks uncomfortable. So he doesn't need to do what he might have had to do last year, especially with the injuries. So I think he's a breakout candidate for me. I think you could see a really solid year from him.
And if you really think about like Darius Slay's kind of career trajectory, when he was drafted by Detroit a couple of years ago, what was it, 2012, I believe, in the second round, he initially off the bat was not very good. And everybody in Detroit, as ridiculous as it might sound now, they wanted him to be cut. They wanted him to be traded. They didn't want any piece of him. And he overcame that. And as a result, you've seen a multiple-time Pro Bowler and all-pro guy develop. And I think that, sure, there's a lot for Sydney to learn from Darius in terms of technique, in terms of just matching up against opposing wide receivers that is invaluable. But I also think that Darius can kind of help him keep his head because a lot of Eagles fans are saying those same things about Sydney. Oh, he's trash. Oh, get him out of here. We need somebody else. And I really don't think that's the case. I think that he has a lot of potential. He is healing from these injuries. And I do think that now that he's going to be relegated to number two receivers, there's a big difference between seeing him try and match up against Amari Cooper versus Michael Gallup. There's a big difference there. There's a big difference between Terry McLaurin and Kelvin Harmon, and it's just every single team across the league. It's very rare that people have two number one receivers. So I think that Sidney Jones is going to have a much better season. I'll just say that. I don't know if he's going to be, have 7 interceptions or anything like that, but I think he's going to really hold down that cornerback two role for a couple years until eventually Darius Slay is gone, and then hopefully he can grow into that.
With that, I think we've got the team down pat. So now it's about how they perform. So let's get to the schedule.
Oh man, the schedule market is real interesting. So I'm going to ask you right off the bat. I know there's a lot of really enticing games here. Which ones are kind of standing out to you just on your first look here?
Yeah, for sure. I think first of all, these games need to be played, which we're hoping to see this year as we're in quarantine day 95. I think the first big matchup we're going to see is against the 49ers. I think that's a big one. I think to be able to see how that offense performs against a top tier defense is going to be huge, and hopefully they're still healthy by week 4. So I think that's big, and also being able to see how that front 4, front 7 holds up against that running attack, I think is going to be huge. I think the corners are going to have an easy ride there. I think it's really going to be on that front 7 being able to stop the running attack there, and George Kittle. So I think that's a big one there. And another one that obviously jumps out is there's actually two of them, but either or, I think probably week 16 versus the Cowboys. I'll go later in the year because I think it's going to be a tight race between those two for the division. So I think that game's going to have a lot behind it, especially that late in the season. So I think being able to see how that plays out, I think they match up very well against each other. Talented defenses, probably top 5 to 10 defenses, and then if it comes out to offensive firepower, I think the Cowboys have it, but I think the Eagles could swing that game. So I think that's going to be a huge game to watch later in the year.
No, I
So
completely. Oh, go
bring
ahead.
that question right back to you. What some games to take out? And if you agree with me, please let me know. I'm very seldomly wrong.
Mm. So I'm going to agree with you with your San Francisco one, but I'm going to take the easy way out and maybe the coward's way out. And I'm going to say every single game from San Francisco down to New Orleans because, like, excluding the Giants, they are playing kind of the best that the NFL has to offer week in and week out. And even the Giants, we said, aren't we think that they are improved. But so, for example, we talked about Andre Dillard earlier. Okay, Andre, you have to go against Nick Bosa, T.J. Watt, Calais Campbell, Demarcus Lawrence, Miles Garrett, Cam Jordan, Demarcus Lawrence again. Zadarius Smith's in there too. Chase Young's in there at the end of the year. Chandler Jones, like there's a lot of great matchups, Mike, and a lot of these teams think that they're playoff teams, and I believe that Philadelphia does too. So I don't want to say like, oh, by week 8 we'll know if the Eagles are pretenders or contenders, but man, it's going to be a really tough stretch there between weeks 4 and 14, and it's really almost unprecedented how tough that schedule is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the one thing that works in their favor though is the Cowboys have a pretty similar schedule. I think that's where they could both be 9-win teams and still probably be some of the top teams in the NFC. That's how difficult the schedule is. So I agree with you there.
And then that does go to the importance though of I'll fuel your ego here of that week 16 matchup, because if you're going to be a 9-win team, I don't know if you're going to be a wild card team. And I think there is a real chance that the Eagles and Cowboys, as really great of teams as they might be, I think that we might see them as 8 or 9 win teams fighting for the division in Week 16. So, and that's going to be super pivotal because maybe they both don't make the playoffs unless these two teams really set the league on fire. I mean, you're facing NFC champions, AFC champion, like just elite quarterbacks, elite pass rushers. You're facing, like I said, kind of the best the NFL has to offer there. Outside of the only thing that would make it worse is if you replace the Giants with like the Chiefs. But other than that, it's about as hard as it can get. So, I mean, speaking of as hard as it is to get, Mike, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to grow your YouTube channel. So what we're
That's
gonna
true.
say, so what we're gonna say to anybody and everybody who's made it this far is make sure you support your boys, your mic'd up boys. Make sure you're liking, make sure you're commenting, subscribing. If you have any questions, if you have anything, just toss in the comments. If you're a Browns fan, if there's any out there, and you want us to do the Browns next, we'll do the Browns next. Just let us know. We're flexible. Don't worry, we don't bite. Just just leave a comment, man. Let us know you're out there because we're doing it for free and we love it. But you know what else we love, Mike?
We love some followers. We love some likes. We love some comments, and we just want your enjoyment. That's what really matters.
We want your enjoyment, and we want to help make, even if it's just one person, a smarter football fan. Maybe just help somebody look at the game a little bit differently, and maybe that person is going to be us. you know, Maybe one of you guys could teach us something. But until you comment, we're not going to find out. So with that being said, Mike.
We mic'd in. We mic out.